In the entire history of naval warfare, one battleship stands above all others for sheer gunnery excellence. HMS Warspite achieved what no other warship has ever accomplished before or since. This is the story of the most accurate naval guns ever fired in combat. The ship that made history with the longest range hit ever recorded at sea. Welcome to the incredible story of Britain's most legendary battleship. On a spring morning in 1915, the British Royal Navy commissioned a vessel that would change naval warfare forever. HMS Warspite, a Queen Elizabeth-class super dreadnought, was the pinnacle of naval engineering. Armed with 8 15-inch guns, this warship could strike targets beyond the horizon. But what made Warspite truly special wasn't just her firepower, it was her unprecedented accuracy. From the moment she entered service, Warspite's gunnery crews demonstrated skills that defied belief. Her fire control systems, combined with exceptional crew training, created the deadliest shooting platform afloat. The Battle of Jutland in 1916 would be Warspite's first major test. This massive naval engagement between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet was the largest battleship confrontation in history. During the battle, Warspite's steering jammed, causing her to circle dangerously close to the entire German fleet. What should have been a death sentence became a demonstration of incredible resilience. Warspite absorbed 13 direct hits from German battleships and still survived. Her armor held, her guns kept firing, and she limped back to port under her own power. This baptism of fire proved Warspite could take punishment and keep fighting. Between the wars, Warspite underwent extensive modernization that transformed her into an even more formidable weapon. New fire control systems, updated armor, and improved engines made her faster and deadlier than ever. But the real revolution came in her gunnery capabilities. Advanced rangefinders, mechanical computers, and optical systems gave Warspite the ability to hit targets with pinpoint precision. When World War II erupted in 1939, Warspite was ready. The old battleship, now 24 years old, would prove that age meant nothing when combined with superior gunnery. Her first major action came during the Norwegian campaign in April 1940. German forces had invaded Norway, and the Royal Navy was tasked with disrupting their operations. The Second Battle of Narvik would become Warspite's defining moment. On April 13, 1940, Warspite led a destroyer flotilla into Ofotfjord. 8 German destroyers were hiding in the narrow fjord, a dangerous trap for any attacking force. What happened next would enter naval history as one of the most devastating displays of naval gunnery ever witnessed. Warspite's 15-inch guns began their deadly work with calculated precision. The first salvo struck the German destroyer Erich Köllner at a range of 16,000 yards. A direct hit. The destroyer erupted in flames and began sinking immediately. But this was just the beginning of Warspite's masterclass in naval combat. As the battle progressed, Warspite's gunners demonstrated accuracy that seemed almost impossible. Salvo after salvo found their marks, each shot calculated with mechanical precision. The German destroyer Erich Giese took multiple direct hits and was blown apart. Wolfgang Zenker ran aground trying to escape Warspite's devastating fire. By the end of the battle, all 8 German destroyers were destroyed or scuttled. Warspite's gunnery had been so accurate that German survivors reported feeling helpless against the barrage. But the most remarkable shot was yet to come. During the battle, Warspite's spotting aircraft detected a German U-boat on the surface. The submarine, designated U-64, was attempting to maneuver in the confined waters. What happened next has never been repeated in naval warfare. Warspite's gunnery officer made rapid calculations for an almost impossible shot. A moving battleship trying to hit a submarine with battleship guns. The 15-inch guns fired, and observers watched the massive shells arc through the Norwegian sky. Direct hit. U-64 was struck by a 15-inch shell. The submarine was obliterated. This remains the only confirmed kill of a submarine by battleship main guns in naval history. The probability of this shot was astronomical, yet Warspite's gunners made it look routine. This incredible feat demonstrated the peak of naval gunnery skill. After Narvik, Warspite was transferred to the Mediterranean, where her legendary accuracy would be tested again. The Battle of Calabria, in July 1940, pitted the Royal Navy against the Italian Regia Marina. Italian battleships were modern, fast, and well-armed, but they were about to face Warspite. As the fleets closed, the Italian battleship Giulio Cesare was confident in her speed and modern design. At approximately 1300 hours, Warspite opened fire. The range was 26,000 yards, nearly 15 miles. At this distance, the target was barely visible even with optical magnification. Warspite's first salvos fell short as her gunnery team made adjustments. The mechanical computers calculated trajectory, windage, and ship movement. The sixth salvo fired. Observers held their breath. 26,000 yards away, a massive explosion erupted on Giulio Cesare. A 15-inch shell had struck the Italian battleship directly. This was the longest range gunnery hit on a moving target by one moving warship against another in naval history. The shot traveled over 14 miles and struck a moving target with perfect precision. Giulio Cesare was heavily damaged and forced to withdraw from the battle. The entire Italian fleet turned away, unwilling to face Warspite's devastating accuracy. This single shot changed the course of the battle and demonstrated naval gunnery at its absolute peak. Naval historians have studied this shot for decades. The mathematical probability of hitting a moving target at 26,000 yards is incredibly small. Both ships were moving. Wind conditions were variable. The shell's time of flight was approximately 40 seconds. During those 40 seconds, Giulio Cesare moved hundreds of yards from where she was when Warspite fired. Warspite's gunnery team had to predict exactly where the enemy ship would be when the shells arrived. They calculated this perfectly, creating a moment that has never been surpassed. But what made Warspite's gunnery so exceptional? The answer lies in a combination of technology, training, and tradition. Warspite's fire control system was among the most advanced in the world. The Admiralty Fire Control Table was a mechanical computer that could calculate firing solutions in real time. It took inputs from rangefinders, speed indicators, and gyroscopic compasses. The system could predict enemy movement and calculate the precise angle and elevation for each gun. But technology alone doesn't explain Warspite's success. Her gunnery crews underwent relentless training that emphasized speed and precision. Loading drills were practiced until each man could perform his role blindfolded. The gun crews developed an almost telepathic coordination, working as a single organism. Warspite's gunnery officers were among the finest in the Royal Navy. They understood ballistics, meteorology, and naval tactics at an expert level. More importantly, they had experience that only came from years of practice and combat. This combination of technology, training, and experience made Warspite virtually unstoppable. After Calabria, Warspite continued her Mediterranean service with distinction. She bombarded enemy positions in North Africa with the same accuracy she displayed in fleet actions. During the Battle of Cape Matapan in March 1941, Warspite helped annihilate an Italian cruiser squadron. Her night-fighting capabilities proved as deadly as her daylight gunnery. The Italian heavy cruisers Fiume, Zara, and Pola were caught by surprise in the darkness. Warspite's guns opened fire at point-blank range by battleship standards. The Italian ships were destroyed in minutes, unable to return effective fire. This battle effectively ended the Italian Navy's offensive capability in the Mediterranean. Throughout 1941 and 42, Warspite served as the backbone of Mediterranean naval operations. She escorted convoys to Malta, bombarded Axis positions, and dueled with enemy aircraft. But even the grand old lady couldn't escape damage forever. In September 1943, Warspite was struck by German radio-controlled bombs off Salerno. These were the first precision-guided weapons used in combat, predecessor to modern cruise missiles. The bombs caused severe damage, blowing a massive hole in Warspite's hull. Many ships would have sunk from such damage, but Warspite was built tough. Her damage control crews fought flooding for hours, eventually stabilizing the ship. Warspite was towed to Malta for emergency repairs, then sailed back to Britain for complete restoration. Most ships with this level of damage would have been scrapped, but Warspite was too valuable. By June 1944, Warspite was back in action for Operation Overlord. The D-Day landings required massive naval gunfire support, and Warspite was chosen for this crucial role. On June 6, 1944, Warspite took position off the Normandy coast. Her target was German positions near Sword Beach, one of the 5 landing zones. What followed was one of the most accurate bombardments in amphibious warfare history. Warspite's 15-inch guns fired methodically at German bunkers and artillery positions. Each shot was precisely aimed using forward observers and aerial spotting. German strongpoints that had been built over years were demolished in minutes. Concrete fortifications designed to withstand smaller weapons crumbled under 15-inch shells. Warspite fired over 300 rounds during the D-Day bombardment. Her accuracy was so consistent that Allied troops on the beaches cheered each time her guns fired. German defenders reported feeling helpless against the precision bombardment. One German officer later stated that Warspite's fire was the most accurate shelling he experienced in the entire war. After D-Day, Warspite continued supporting Allied advances along the French coast. She bombarded German positions at Le Havre, Brest, and Walcheren Island. Each bombardment demonstrated the same legendary accuracy that had defined her entire career. But time and damage were finally catching up with the old warrior. In June 1944, Warspite struck a mine off Normandy. The explosion caused severe damage to her hull and knocked out several compartments. Once again, Warspite refused to sink, limping back to port for repairs. The repairs took months, but Warspite returned to action one final time in November 1944. She bombarded German positions at Walcheren Island, supporting Allied operations to clear the Scheldt estuary. Her final combat action showed the same precision that had marked her entire service. German fortifications were methodically destroyed by accurate 15-inch fire. When Warspite ceased fire for the last time, she had compiled a combat record unmatched by any battleship. After the war ended in Europe, Warspite was finally retired from active service. She had served for 30 years, fought in both world wars, and survived damage that would have sunk most ships multiple times. Her battle honors were legendary, the most of any ship in the Royal Navy. Warspite had earned 15 battle honors, more than any other British warship. From Jutland to Normandy, she had been present at nearly every major naval engagement. The ship that sailors called the Grand Old Lady had earned every ounce of respect. In 1947, Warspite was sold for scrap, her service finally at an end. But even in death, the old battleship showed her defiant spirit. While being towed to the breaker's yard, Warspite broke free during a storm. The old warrior ran aground at Cudden Point in Cornwall, refusing to go quietly. It took years to fully dismantle her, as if Warspite was reluctant to leave. Today, Warspite's legacy lives on in naval history and maritime tradition. Her record of gunnery accuracy has never been surpassed. The 26,000-yard hit on Giulio Cesare remains the longest-range hit in naval warfare history. No modern warship has achieved a comparable feat with gun weapons. The destruction of U-64 by main battery guns remains unique in naval annals. These achievements represent the absolute peak of naval gunnery before the missile age. Naval historians continue to study Warspite's tactics and gunnery methods. Modern fire control systems can trace their lineage back to the systems Warspite used. The principles of predictive targeting and mechanical computation that Warspite employed are still relevant today. But what truly set Warspite apart was the human element. Her crews were trained to a standard of excellence that modern navies still aspire to achieve. The dedication, skill, and courage of Warspite's sailors made her legendary. They operated complex machinery under combat conditions, often while under fire themselves. Their ability to maintain accuracy and discipline in the chaos of battle was extraordinary. Warspite's story is ultimately a story about people as much as technology. The Royal Navy's tradition of excellence, embodied by Warspite, set standards for naval forces worldwide. Her influence extended beyond Britain, as other nations studied her methods and results. When considering the greatest warships in history, certain criteria define true greatness. Longevity of service is important, and Warspite served for 30 years. Combat effectiveness matters, and Warspite fought in more major actions than almost any battleship. Survivability is crucial, and Warspite survived damage that would have destroyed other ships. But most importantly, a great warship achieves results that others cannot. Warspite's gunnery achievements stand alone in naval history. No other battleship achieved hits at comparable ranges with such consistency. Her ability to strike targets precisely at extreme distances changed how naval warfare was conducted. Enemy commanders learned to respect Warspite's range and accuracy. Italian ships would withdraw when Warspite appeared, knowing they were outmatched. German forces at Narvik were overwhelmed by the precision of her fire. This psychological impact was as important as the physical damage her guns inflicted. The technology that enabled Warspite's accuracy was revolutionary for its time. The Admiralty Fire Control Table was an analog computer decades ahead of its era. It used mechanical gears and cams to solve complex ballistic equations in real time. Inputs from various sensors were integrated to produce a single firing solution. The system could adjust for wind, ship motion, target speed, and range simultaneously. This level of computational capability wouldn't be matched by electronic computers for decades. Warspite's rangefinders were equally impressive technological achievements. These optical instruments could measure distances accurately up to 30,000 yards. They used the principle of stereoscopic ranging, similar to human depth perception. Two separate images were superimposed, and when they aligned perfectly, the range could be read. The skill required to operate these instruments was considerable. Rangefinder operators needed steady hands, excellent vision, and years of training. They had to maintain concentration while the ship rolled, pitched, and vibrated from gunfire. Warspite's rangefinder teams were among the best in the Royal Navy. The ship's guns themselves were engineering marvels. Each 15-inch gun was 42 feet long and weighed over 90 tons. The barrel was made of special steel alloy that could withstand enormous pressures. When fired, the pressure inside the barrel reached 22 tons per square inch. The shell left the barrel at over 1,600 miles per hour. Despite these violent forces, the guns maintained accuracy through hundreds of firings. The ammunition Warspite used was equally sophisticated. Armor-piercing shells weighed 1,900 pounds each. These projectiles were designed to penetrate thick armor before exploding inside the target. A special hardened cap allowed the shell to bite into armor without shattering. Behind the cap was a delay fuse that detonated the explosive charge after penetration. High explosive shells were used for shore bombardment and softer targets. These shells contained over 100 pounds of explosives. The blast from a single 15-inch high explosive shell could devastate a large area. Warspite carried hundreds of these shells, giving her devastating firepower. Loading and firing these massive weapons required precise crew coordination. Each gun turret had a crew of over 70 men working in the turret and magazines below. The shells were stored deep in the ship and had to be hoisted up through multiple decks. Propellant charges came up separately and were loaded behind the shell. The breech was closed, the gun elevated to the correct angle, and the firing order given. The entire process could be completed in as little as 20 seconds by experienced crews. This rate of fire was exceptional for guns of this size and power. Warspite could unleash a full broadside of 8 15-inch shells every 30 seconds. This meant 15,000 pounds of shells hitting a target area every half minute. The destructive power was almost incomprehensible. But raw firepower alone doesn't explain Warspite's success. Many battleships had comparable or even greater firepower than Warspite. What separated Warspite was her ability to put those shells exactly where they needed to go. Her hit rate in combat was consistently higher than other battleships of her era. During the Battle of Calabria, Warspite achieved a hit with her 6th salvo at maximum range. Most battleships would need dozens of salvos to achieve a hit at such distances. At Narvik, her accuracy against destroyers in confined waters was devastating. During shore bombardments, her shells consistently landed within meters of their intended targets. This level of precision was the result of countless hours of practice and refinement. The Royal Navy placed enormous emphasis on gunnery training throughout Warspite's career. Gunnery exercises were conducted constantly, even during peacetime. Crews competed for efficiency ratings, and top performers received recognition and rewards. This competitive culture drove continuous improvement in technique and speed. Warspite's crews took pride in their reputation as the finest gunners afloat. The ship's gunnery officers were carefully selected from the best talent available. They attended specialized schools where advanced mathematics and physics were studied. Understanding ballistics at a theoretical level allowed them to optimize firing solutions. They could account for variables that other gunners might overlook. Weather conditions had significant effects on shell trajectory at extreme ranges. Wind speed and direction could deflect shells by hundreds of yards. Air temperature and density affected shell velocity and drop. Even the temperature of the propellant charges influenced muzzle velocity. Warspite's gunnery officers mastered all these variables. They maintained detailed records of each gun's performance characteristics. Individual guns developed slight differences in behavior as barrels wore over time. These differences were catalogued and incorporated into firing calculations. This attention to detail gave Warspite an edge over opponents who used standardized data. The spotting of fall of shot was another critical skill that Warspite's crews perfected. When shells landed, observers had to quickly determine if they were short, over, left, or right. This information was immediately fed back to the fire control team for adjustments. The faster and more accurately spotting was done, the quicker hits could be achieved. Warspite spotters were trained to identify shell splashes instantly among other distractions. In the confusion of battle with multiple ships firing, this required exceptional skill. Warspite also pioneered the use of aircraft for spotting during shore bombardments. A spotter plane launched from the ship could observe targets beyond the horizon. The aircraft would radio back corrections, allowing Warspite to hit targets she couldn't even see. This capability was revolutionary and gave Warspite unprecedented reach. During the Norwegian campaign, Warspite's aircraft spotted German destroyers hiding in fjords. The aircraft also spotted the U-boat that Warspite subsequently destroyed. Without aerial reconnaissance, that historic shot would never have been possible. The integration of air power with naval gunnery was ahead of its time. Many navies were slow to adopt this tactic, but Warspite demonstrated its effectiveness repeatedly. By World War II, spotter aircraft had become standard on major warships. Warspite's success helped drive this doctrinal change across naval forces worldwide. The psychological impact of Warspite's accurate gunnery cannot be overstated. Enemy crews knew they were facing a ship with a fearsome reputation. The knowledge that Warspite could hit them from beyond their own effective range was demoralizing. Italian commanders at Calabria chose to disengage rather than face sustained fire from Warspite. German defenders at Normandy requested reinforcements when they learned Warspite was offshore. This reputation was earned through decades of consistent performance. Warspite never disappointed. In every engagement, she performed at or above expectations. This reliability was as valuable as her raw combat power. Commanders could plan operations knowing Warspite would deliver results. Her presence in a battle plan wasn't just about firepower, it was about guaranteed effectiveness. The comparison between Warspite and other famous battleships reveals her unique place in history. The German battleship Bismarck was more modern and arguably more powerful. But Bismarck's career lasted only 9 days before she was sunk. Warspite served for 30 years and survived everything thrown at her. The American battleship USS Iowa had superior speed and firepower. But Iowa never achieved a gunnery hit comparable to Warspite's record at Calabria. The Japanese battleship Yamato mounted the largest naval guns ever built. But Yamato's combat record pales in comparison to Warspite's extensive action history. What made Warspite special wasn't any single attribute, but the combination of all factors: longevity, combat effectiveness, survivability, and legendary accuracy. No other battleship matched this complete package of capabilities. Warspite's influence extended beyond her own actions to affect naval doctrine globally. Her success demonstrated that accuracy was more important than raw firepower. This lesson influenced battleship design in the interwar period and beyond. Navies invested more heavily in fire control systems after observing Warspite's results. The emphasis on gunnery training increased across all major naval powers. Competition between ships and fleets became focused on accuracy rather than just gun size. Warspite had effectively changed the metrics by which naval power was measured. The technical innovations pioneered on Warspite spread throughout the Royal Navy. Her fire control systems were studied and improved upon for newer ships. The lessons learned from her combat experience informed the design of future battleships. Even after battleships became obsolete, Warspite's legacy continued. Modern guided missile systems owe a debt to the fire control principles Warspite used. The concept of predictive targeting remains central to all weapon systems. Digital computers now perform calculations that Warspite's mechanical systems once did. But the fundamental principles remain unchanged from those Warspite employed. The human element that made Warspite great is often overlooked in discussions of technology. The best fire control system is useless without skilled operators. Warspite's crews understood this truth and maintained their skills through constant practice. They took pride in their ship and competed to be the best at every task. This culture of excellence pervaded every aspect of Warspite's operations. From the engine rooms to the gun turrets, every sailor understood their role's importance. The damage control teams who saved Warspite multiple times were as crucial as the gunners. The engineers who kept her engines running through decades of hard service were unsung heroes. Every member of Warspite's crew contributed to her legendary status. The officers who commanded Warspite throughout her career deserve special recognition. They had to make split-second decisions in the chaos of combat. Positioning the ship for optimal firing angles while avoiding enemy fire required exceptional skill. Managing a crew of over 1,000 men in combat conditions was an enormous challenge. Warspite's captains consistently demonstrated tactical brilliance and courage under fire. Admiral Andrew Cunningham, who flew his flag on Warspite during Mediterranean operations, praised her repeatedly. He considered Warspite the finest battleship in the Royal Navy. His trust in Warspite's capabilities allowed him to plan bold operations that other commanders might avoid. At Cape Matapan, Cunningham relied on Warspite as the centerpiece of his night attack. The gamble paid off spectacularly, and Warspite's guns were decisive in the victory. The maintenance and upkeep required to keep Warspite operational was a massive undertaking. Between combat deployments, she underwent numerous refits and upgrades. Her engines were overhauled multiple times to maintain reliability. Her armor was reinforced in vulnerable areas, identified through combat experience. Her fire control systems were updated with the latest technology as it became available. This continuous improvement kept Warspite competitive against newer, more modern ships. The dockyard workers who performed these refits were as important as the sailors who fought the ship. Their skilled craftsmanship ensured Warspite remained battle-ready throughout her career. After taking severe damage multiple times, they rebuilt her stronger than before. The fact that Warspite survived to serve for 30 years is testament to their dedication. The cost of maintaining Warspite was substantial, but the Royal Navy considered it worthwhile. Her combat effectiveness justified the resources invested in her upkeep. In an era when battleships were expensive to build, keeping proven vessels operational made sense. Warspite was more valuable than a newer ship that lacked her combat-proven reliability. Her reputation alone had strategic value that couldn't be easily quantified. The stories and legends that grew around Warspite became part of Royal Navy tradition. Sailors considered it an honor to serve aboard the Grand Old Lady. Veterans of Warspite's crew formed a bond that lasted their entire lives. Reunions were held for decades after the war, where old shipmates shared memories. They spoke with pride about their service and the ship that had kept them safe through so many battles. The emotional connection between Warspite and her crews was deep and genuine. Many veterans named their children after the ship or kept mementos throughout their lives. When Warspite was finally scrapped, former crew members mourned as if losing a friend. Some attended the breaking up, wanting to pay final respects to the ship that had defined their youth. This emotional resonance is unique to truly great ships that earn genuine affection. Today, relics from Warspite are preserved in museums and memorials across Britain. Her bell is displayed with honors, a symbol of her distinguished service. Pieces of her armor and equipment are held in private collections and naval museums. These physical reminders connect modern generations to Warspite's incredible history. The Royal Navy maintains Warspite's memory through ceremonial traditions. Her battle honors are remembered during commemorations of major naval engagements. Modern warships continue the tradition of excellence that Warspite exemplified. The name Warspite itself has been carried by multiple ships throughout British naval history. Each vessel bearing the name has strived to uphold the reputation of its predecessor. The most famous Warspite, the Queen Elizabeth-class battleship, set a standard that remains unsurpassed. In the age of missiles and aircraft carriers, battleships have become obsolete. No navy maintains battleships in active service anymore. But the lessons learned from ships like Warspite remain relevant. Accuracy, training, crew morale, and technical excellence are still essential. Modern weapons systems may be different, but the principles of effective warfare haven't changed. Warspite's legacy lives on in these enduring principles. The technological evolution from mechanical computers to digital systems is remarkable. Yet the fundamental challenge remains predicting where a target will be and placing ordnance there. Warspite's fire control team did this with gears and optical instruments. Modern systems use satellites, radar, and supercomputers. But the core problem and solution remain conceptually identical. In this sense, Warspite's gunners were the ancestors of today's weapons systems operators. The specific comparison between Warspite's longest-range hit and modern capabilities is interesting. At 26,000 yards, Warspite hit a moving target with unguided shells. Modern missiles can engage targets at hundreds of miles with near certainty. But missiles are guided, making corrections throughout their flight. Warspite's shells followed a ballistic trajectory with no guidance after leaving the gun. The calculation had to be perfect before firing, with no opportunity for correction. This makes Warspite's achievement even more impressive from a technical standpoint. The human skill required to achieve this feat was extraordinary. Modern automated systems remove much of the human element from targeting. Computers calculate solutions faster and more accurately than any human could. But Warspite's era required human judgment, skill, and intuition. The gunners had to feel when conditions were right for the perfect shot. This blend of science and art is what made naval gunnery a true skill. Warspite's gunners were masters of this art at its absolute peak. When considering what made Warspite the most accurate battleship in history, several factors emerge. First, her fire control technology was among the best available. Second, her crew training was exceptional and continuous. Third, her extensive combat experience refined techniques and identified best practices. Fourth, her long service life allowed institutional knowledge to accumulate. Fifth, the Royal Navy's culture of excellence provided constant motivation for improvement. No single factor alone explains Warspite's success. It was the combination and reinforcement of all these elements that created greatness. Other ships had good technology, but lacked experienced crews. Others had good crews but outdated equipment. Warspite maintained the optimal balance of all necessary factors throughout her career. This consistency of excellence over decades is what truly sets her apart. The historical documentation of Warspite's achievements is extensive and well verified. Official Royal Navy records detail her combat actions with precision. Action reports from various battles provide contemporary accounts of her performance. Enemy accounts, particularly Italian and German records, confirm the impact of her gunnery. Survivor testimonies from friend and foe alike speak to her legendary accuracy. Photographs and film footage document some of her most significant actions. This wealth of historical evidence leaves no doubt about Warspite's accomplishments. Modern historians have extensively analyzed Warspite's combat record. The consensus is clear that her gunnery achievements remain unmatched. Some have attempted to identify comparable feats by other battleships. While other ships certainly achieved impressive results, none match Warspite's combination of range, accuracy, and consistency. The 26,000-yard hit at Calabria stands alone in the historical record. No authenticated account exists of a longer-range hit between moving warships using gun armament. This record has stood for over 80 years and will almost certainly never be broken. The era of battleship gun duels ended with World War II. Modern naval warfare is conducted at ranges where guns are ineffective. Missiles, aircraft, and submarines have made surface gun duels obsolete. Warspite's achievements represent the pinnacle of a form of warfare that no longer exists. In this sense, she is not just the best at what she did, but the best that will ever exist. Her records are frozen in time, unreachable by any future vessel. This adds a poignant finality to her legacy. The impact Warspite had on the course of World War II should not be underestimated. At Narvik, her destruction of German destroyers hampered Nazi operations in Norway. At Calabria, her hit on Giulio Cesare discouraged Italian fleet operations. At Cape Matapan, her guns helped annihilate Italian naval power in the Mediterranean. On D-Day, her accurate bombardment saved countless Allied lives. Each of these actions had strategic consequences that rippled through the war. Warspite wasn't just a successful warship, she was a war-winning asset. The British Mediterranean strategy relied heavily on Warspite's presence. Her ability to dominate Italian battleships allowed convoys to reach Malta. Malta's survival as a base was crucial to Allied success in North Africa. The North African campaign's success was essential to the eventual invasion of Italy. This chain of causation traces back in part to Warspite's combat effectiveness. Similarly, her performance at Normandy contributed to the success of Operation Overlord. The D-Day landings were the turning point of the war in Europe. Every ship that supported the landings contributed to this world-changing event. Warspite's accurate fire neutralized German positions that could have inflicted heavy casualties. The lives saved by her precision cannot be counted but were undoubtedly significant. For the men who landed on Sword Beach, Warspite's guns were guardian angels. The gratitude expressed by soldiers toward naval gunfire support was always heartfelt. Warspite earned this gratitude many times over throughout the war. The personal stories of Warspite's crew add human dimension to her technical achievements. Young sailors joined the ship as teenagers and grew into experienced veterans. They witnessed history from the deck of the most legendary battleship afloat. Some served through multiple campaigns, surviving dangers that claimed many others. Their memoirs and letters provide intimate glimpses into life aboard Warspite. The camaraderie aboard ship was intense, forged in shared danger and hardship. Living in close quarters with over 1,000 men created bonds that lasted lifetimes. The ship became home in the deepest sense, a floating community with its own culture. Traditions unique to Warspite developed over her 30 years of service. Ceremonies marking battle anniversaries were observed with solemnity and pride. New crew members were initiated into the ship's history and expected to uphold her reputation. This sense of continuity linked generations of sailors who served aboard her. Veterans from World War I served alongside young men who knew only World War II. The older sailors passed down knowledge and traditions to the younger generation. This living transmission of expertise was invaluable in maintaining standards. The physical conditions aboard Warspite during combat were extremely challenging. Inside the gun turrets, temperatures could exceed 100 degrees during sustained firing. The noise was deafening even with hearing protection. The concussion from firing the main guns shook the entire ship violently. Cordite fumes filled the air, making breathing difficult. Despite these harsh conditions, the gun crews maintained their precision and efficiency. Their ability to perform complex tasks under such stress was remarkable. Below decks, the engine room crews faced their own challenges. Maintaining steam pressure during combat maneuvers required constant attention. The heat from the boilers made the engine rooms almost unbearable. Yet these men kept Warspite moving through every battle. When damage occurred, the damage control parties worked miracles. After the mine strike in 1944, they saved the ship through heroic efforts. Working in flooded compartments, they shored up bulkheads and stopped the flooding. Some worked for hours in water up to their chests, risking their lives to save the ship. These acts of courage happened far from the glory of the gun turrets. But without them, Warspite would have been lost multiple times. The medical staff aboard Warspite also deserve recognition for their service. During battles, the sick bay became a surgery where wounded were treated under fire. The ship's doctors and medical orderlies saved countless lives through their skill and dedication. Operating on wounded sailors while the ship was in combat required extraordinary composure. Every member of Warspite's crew had a crucial role to play. From the captain on the bridge to the cook in the galley, each contributed to the whole. This total team effort was what made Warspite more than just a collection of weapons and armor. She was a living, fighting organism, effective because all parts worked together. The comparison between early 20th century naval warfare and modern combat is striking. In Warspite's day, opposing ships often fought within visual range of each other. Sailors could see the enemy vessels they were engaging. There was something almost chivalrous about these ship-to-ship duels. Modern naval combat is conducted at ranges where enemies never see each other. Missiles are launched over the horizon toward radar contacts. The personal element has been largely removed from naval warfare. Warspite represents the last era, when naval combat was conducted by men looking through optical sights. The skill and courage required in that era was fundamentally different from today. This doesn't diminish modern sailors, but it highlights what made Warspite's generation unique. The vulnerability of battleships to air attack eventually made them obsolete. Warspite herself fell victim to aerial weapons multiple times. The radio-controlled bombs that damaged her at Salerno were precursors to modern precision weapons. Against such weapons, even the thickest armor was inadequate. This marked the beginning of the end for the battleship as the dominant naval weapon. Aircraft carriers became the new capital ships, projecting power through aircraft rather than guns. But even as battleships faded into history, Warspite's accomplishments remained impressive. She proved that well-designed ships with excellent crews could remain effective for decades. Her longevity and adaptability were lessons that applied to all naval vessels. The ability to upgrade and modernize existing ships extended their useful lives. This was more economical than constantly building new vessels. Warspite's multiple refits demonstrated how older ships could remain competitive. Modern navies still apply these principles when upgrading existing vessels. The economic realities that made Warspite valuable then still apply today. Naval vessels are expensive, and extending their service lives makes financial sense. The cultural impact of Warspite extended beyond military and naval circles. She became a symbol of British naval power and tradition. During World War II, her exploits were reported in newspapers and celebrated by the public. She represented hope and strength during Britain's darkest hours. The knowledge that Warspite was fighting for them gave civilians confidence. War bonds were sold using Warspite's image and reputation. Children collected cigarette cards featuring pictures of the famous battleship. She was woven into the cultural fabric of wartime Britain. After the war, Warspite remained in public consciousness as a symbol of victory. Her story was told in books, documentaries, and historical accounts. Naval enthusiasts and historians studied her career extensively. Model makers reproduced her in miniature, preserving her appearance for new generations. Artists painted dramatic scenes of her most famous battles. These artistic representations kept her memory alive in popular culture. The 21st century has seen renewed interest in Warspite's story. Digital media has made her history accessible to global audiences. Video documentaries have introduced new generations to her achievements. Online communities of naval history enthusiasts discuss and analyze her battles. Virtual recreations allow people to experience what Warspite looked like in her prime. This ongoing interest demonstrates that Warspite's story still resonates. The themes of excellence, courage, and resilience are timeless. People respond to stories of achievement and dedication regardless of era. Warspite embodies these qualities in a way that transcends her specific historical context. For military professionals, Warspite offers lessons that remain relevant. The importance of training and crew excellence cannot be overstated. Technology alone doesn't win battles, people do. The best equipment is worthless without skilled operators. Warspite demonstrated this truth repeatedly throughout her career. Maintenance and readiness are crucial for sustained effectiveness. Warspite was kept in excellent condition through constant attention. When called upon, she was always ready to perform. This reliability made her invaluable to commanders planning operations. Leadership matters enormously in determining a unit's effectiveness. Warspite's officers set high standards and inspired their crews to meet them. The culture of excellence they created became self-perpetuating. New sailors joining the ship absorbed this culture and maintained it. Adaptability and continuous improvement kept Warspite competitive. She evolved throughout her career, incorporating new technologies and tactics. This willingness to change prevented obsolescence. Organizations that fail to adapt eventually fail completely. Warspite survived because she adapted to changing circumstances. These lessons apply far beyond naval warfare. Any organization striving for excellence can learn from Warspite's example. The principles that made her great are universal. When we ask what made HMS Warspite the most accurate battleship in history, the answer is complex. It wasn't just one thing, but many factors working together. Superior technology provided the foundation. Exceptional training built the skills needed to use that technology. Combat experience refined techniques and built confidence. Strong leadership created a culture of excellence. Institutional support provided resources and recognition. Most importantly, the dedication of thousands of sailors over 30 years. Each man who served aboard Warspite contributed to her legend. From the admirals who commanded fleets to the ordinary seamen who loaded shells, every role mattered. Every person made a difference. The sum of these individual contributions created something greater than any single part. This is the true secret of Warspite's greatness. She was more than steel and guns, she was a living legacy. The record-breaking hit at 26,000 yards at Calabria, the destruction of U-64 with battleship guns, the devastation of the German destroyer squadron at Narvik, the precision bombardments at Normandy that saved countless lives. These achievements define naval gunnery excellence. No other battleship matched this combination of range, accuracy, and consistency. Warspite set standards that remain unsurpassed 8 decades later. In an era when battleships ruled the seas, she was the queen of them all. Her 15-inch guns spoke with authority that enemies learned to fear. Her armor withstood punishment that would have sunk other ships. Her crews exhibited courage and skill of the highest order. For 30 years, through 2 world wars, she served with distinction. She earned more battle honors than any ship in the Royal Navy. She survived damage that would have destroyed lesser vessels. She achieved feats of gunnery that defied probability. When the final accounting is made, HMS Warspite stands alone, the most accurate battleship in naval history. The ship that made the longest range hit ever recorded in combat. The grand old lady who refused to sink despite everything thrown at her. Her story is one of human excellence, achieving the seemingly impossible. Of technology pushed to its absolute limits. Of courage maintained through years of danger. Of a ship that became more than just a weapon. She became a symbol, a legend, an inspiration. Today, over 70 years after her scrapping, Warspite lives on in memory. Her achievements remain a benchmark for naval excellence. Her story continues to inspire those who value courage and skill. In the annals of naval warfare, few ships have earned such lasting fame. HMS Warspite, the most accurate battleship ever to sail the seas. The ship that proved excellence is built one day at a time. Through dedication, training, and unwavering commitment to perfection, her legacy reminds us that greatness is always possible. When technology, training, and human spirit combine, when every member of a team strives for excellence, when leadership sets high standards and people rise to meet them. This is the lesson of HMS Warspite, not just a story about a ship, but about what humans can achieve, about reaching for excellence and refusing to settle for less, about creating something that outlasts its creators. The guns are silent now, the ship long gone, but the spirit of Warspite endures. In the traditions of the Royal Navy, in the memories of those who served, in the historical record that documents her incredible achievements, and in the inspiration she provides to new generations. HMS Warspite, legendary battleship, master of naval gunnery, holder of records that will never be broken, the grand old lady whose guns never missed. This has been her story, a story of excellence, courage, and legendary accuracy. The story of the greatest gunnery ship ever to sail. HMS Warspite, forever remembered, forever legendary.